Welcome to part one of the How to Start a Podcast video series. In this first video, we're going to be talking about the equipment and software needed to get your podcast up and running. Not only that, we're going to choose equipment that is budget friendly and is also going to give you the highest quality possible. So don't go anywhere. Okay, the first thing you need to think about when you're getting ready to start a podcast is obviously a microphone. Now, there are a lot of different options out there for microphones, so I want to try to break this down and make it really easy for you guys so that you can just jump right in and start recording your podcast. When you start doing research on the microphones, you're going to find that there are mainly two basic types of microphones. You're going to have a condenser microphone like this, or you are going to have a dynamic microphone like this one here. Without diving too deep into the technical side of what each microphone does, I'm going to give you my best suggestion for you as you begin your podcast. Typically, a condenser mic gives you a little bit better audio, but I would actually recommend you start with a dynamic mic as opposed to a condenser, because a condenser mic is going to pick up a lot more of the background noise. So if you're in a noisy environment, you got a fan going on in the background, if you're recording your podcast in a bedroom or another room of your house like I do, this is going to pick up a lot more of that noise. With a dynamic microphone, you actually need to be speaking directly into the top of this microphone. If you start coming off to the side like this, you'll notice that my voice tends to fade as I get around it. With a condenser mic, you can pick up sound all the way around it. If you are not in a studio environment, I would highly recommend you go with a dynamic microphone as opposed to a condenser. If you do choose that the dynamic microphone is the route you want to go, you know that you're not going to be in a studio-like environment, there's two suggestions that I have as far as which microphone to actually choose. The first one is the microphone that I'm using right here. This is the Samsung Q2U. This is a fairly cheap microphone. I think the microphone itself is about $60, and I will put a link to this microphone and actually a podcast bundle that you can get in the description of this video. With the Samsung Q2U, you can actually use both USB or XLR cable. So if you don't have a mixer that you're actually going to run this microphone through, you can use a USB, and that is actually what I've been doing since I started my podcast, and it so far has worked great. Sometimes this microphone can be a little bit difficult to get a hold of, so my next suggestion would be the Audio-Technica ATR 2100, and I will also put a link to that microphone in the description as well. Next, I want to talk about headphones. A lot of people ask, are headphones necessary? Yes, they are. And the reason I say that they're necessary is because let's say you are doing an interview through the computer. If that audio is coming back through your computer, your microphone is going to end up picking up that audio. With the headphones on, you can actually block out the sound coming back so that your microphone is not picking up that sound. And not only that, the headphones allow you to actually track your voice. You'll be able to pick up on if you're coming in too loud or too quiet, and you can make adjustments as you're recording. When you're picking out headphones, you want to choose headphones that kind of have a flatter frequency. Something like Beats headphones, those bring out way too much bass. So when you're editing, it's actually not giving you a true sound to what's actually coming through. I would recommend you get a little bit nicer of a headset as opposed to headphones that came with your phone. I typically will use these headphones for both recording and editing, and I find that these headphones do a little bit better job when it comes to actually editing the podcast. Now, as far as which headphones would I recommend, these ones here are the Audio-Technica ATH M50X. They're a little bit on the expensive side, but I do find that I get the best quality when it comes to editing the podcast. If the M50Xs are a little bit out of your price point, the M20X headphones are also great headphones when you're just starting out. The next thing I want to talk about is a pop filter, this bad boy. There's a couple different kinds of pop filters you can get, or windscreens. You can get something that looks a little bit more like this, or if you opt for the Samsung Q2U, this little cover here is also acts as a pop filter. So what this is actually going to do is it's going to block some of the air coming through into the microphone so you don't get that huge pop sound. Typically pop filters are pretty cheap, but I will link to a couple of my recommended options down in the description of this video as well. The next thing we have to talk about is the software. Depending on how you choose to run your show, if you're doing solo-based episodes, you can probably get away with using one software for both recording and editing your podcast. If you're going to be doing an interview-based podcast, you're going to have guests coming on your show, I would definitely recommend using different software for that than you would actually editing. And we're going to get into that in the next video. So make sure if you're interested in doing an interview-based, guest-based podcast, you tune in for that next video. So which software do I recommend? If you are doing solo episodes for your podcast, Audacity and GarageBand are two of the best softwares you can get for free. GarageBand is obviously only for Mac users, but Audacity can be used on both PC and Mac. My personal favorite is Adobe Audition. If you're not quite ready to spend the money on the software side of things, I would just recommend going with something like Audacity. Okay, so what happens if you're going to be doing a guest-based, interview-based podcast? This is exactly what I do on the 9-5 podcast. Every single one of my episodes is interview based, which means I need a better way to track and bring in the audio. Skype and Zoom are both very plausible options, but I just don't think that the quality coming through from those programs will be as good as some of these others that I'm going to suggest. Right now, I'm currently using Zen Caster, and what Zen Caster, it works very similarly to something like Zoom or Skype, only you don't have video on the other side. Just send somebody the link and they get thrown into the chat room, and then from that chat room, you record both your audio and your guest audio, and what it'll actually do is record them on separate tracks. So now when you go back to editing, it's a little bit easier. My other recommendation for interview guest-based podcast would be Squadcast. Now, I have not used Squadcast personally myself, but I do know a lot of podcasters who do. The only catch with Squadcast is that it is a paid software, whereas Zencaster, you can get started for free right now. So again, it's going to kind of come down to your personal preference. Right now, Zencaster really covers all the needs that I have when it comes to podcasting, but I'll put the links to both Zencaster and Squadcast in the video description. So now you know what equipment and software you need to get started. In the next video, we're going to be talking about how to use that equipment and software to record and edit your podcast. So make sure you stick around for the next video. If you enjoyed this video or if the information here was helpful, I would really appreciate it if you subscribed and liked the video. Now that you have the software and equipment needed to start your podcast, let's jump to part 2 of the How to Start a Podcast video series.